believe me when I say, dear friends and followers of this channel, that whatever I say, I'm never just instructing you to do things or advising or revealing things that I've learned. I'm always applying them to myself. And there are times where I'm having conversations or I'm putting something out online and I'm having to do really big, deep breaths throughout it. Believe me when I say that I feel enormously uncomfortable saying certain things, but the shift is that I'm glad. I am glad. It doesn't mean that it's easy, because my favourite podcast, the Delling Pod with James Dellingpole, releases, and I'm a subscribed member, very, very important, as a subscriber, a paid subscriber, I get early access to his podcasts, and I'm always thrilled when one comes up, because without fail, they're always interesting, always fascinating, and always very educational, actually, as well as entertaining. He's just good, he's just good. And on today's released episode, he was speaking with this chap who, it's all sort of anti-politics, anti-woke and anti-globalist, and wanting to find, on a positive note, solutions to the cultural climate that we're living in at the moment. And there was a particular moment where they were talking about women in the aerospace industry. And this chap, the guest, was trying to he was broaching the line of sort of conspiracy theorist and normie, and he was trying to sound sort of politically correct, and it was very, very satisfying, because the host, James, without actually saying this, he said, "Look, you're being a bit gay about this." You're being a bit politically correct, you're being a little bit normie, you don't need to make justifications for the things that you're saying on this channel. And the interesting thing was, as an enormous people pleaser, I felt his discomfort, because I have experienced the same discomfort myself in so many different situations for my whole life. And I was really there with him. I really felt it in my body, and I was so proud. I was so pleased, because I thought, oh yeah, James, go for it. Make him up his game, as we say here in the UK. And it just made me realise that this is such a widespread problem, because the admission that James, the host, made was that, oh God, I hate confrontation, I don't like it, but it is necessary, because if you're going to speak the truth, then just speak it. Do not qualify it, do not justify it. If something is true, it's true, and we all know what's true. That's never actually the issue. The issue is that people want their way, but also that people are so uncomfortable, and we are so imprisoned emotionally and mentally, and often sometimes physically. We won't go out and adventure in the world. It's a widespread problem for people, and it's why I'm in therapy. And it's because I'm doing it weekly, and I've been doing it for a few months now. It's actually really starting to kick in. I believe in myself far more so, and I'm finding myself standing my ground in an assertive way, but not in an aggressive way. And there are times where I say things that maybe go against the grain of my family, because they have their own positions and their own conditioning. But what I'm finding myself doing now, which really helps, is very simple, very, very effective, is lots of deep breathing and reminding myself in my mind, in my head, once I've said something that makes me feel slightly or really uncomfortable, breathe. Deep breaths. Because what deep breaths actually do are slow things down. Rather than resorting to imprinted, conditioned, and familiar patterns of behaviour, when you slow things down, you have a space, and quite a lot of space when you take a proper deep breath, to remind yourself, I've just said something that's perfectly reasonable, it's perfectly genuine, I am being authentic, I do not need to explain myself to other people. Now that is something that, you can't say all of that in your head as you're having the conversation and your heart rate is up. And I could feel that when I was watching this particular podcast, you can hear that the host's voice speeds up a little bit as speeding up. You can see that he's like really, whoa, he's rustled, he's rustling up. And if you can give yourself the opportunity to use tools like breathing as a pattern interrupt, well, then you will slow the process down and you'll realize that you are just as entitled as everybody else to be confident, to be honest. It's good. It's good. Keep reminding yourself, I've spoken the truth. I've put my point across. It's good. I feel good about myself for doing this. And it takes however long it takes. I don't know. But I certainly know that the last week, particularly the last few days, I felt so much more settled by things. I felt about splitting with my ex, really feeling, the feelings are catching up with the thoughts. Really feeling and understanding now that things with my ex were never going to work because we were never going to be on the same page. He made it obvious where he was, and I knew at the time where I wanted to be, but it was in the future. It was always the can being kicked further down the road. But now I feel far more integrated as a human being because I know that I have a voice. I know that I have the right to speak, and that's why I record these videos to remind you that you have the same. If we're going to have concepts like assertiveness or assertion, whichever one, and confidence, well then they have to be applied equally and consistently if they're going to be a thing. So if other people can be confident to say what they want to say, I can be assertive and confident and say what I want to say, and so can you. Keep reminding yourself of this. You, my friend, are far greater than you realize.